June 12th, 1942. Dear Kitty, I hope I will be able to confide everything to you, because I have never been able to confide in anyone.
That was a clip from Ari Folman's 2021 animated film, Where is Anne Frank? Just one of the scores of depictions of the famous diarist since her scattered papers were collected from the floor of her hiding place on the evening of her arrest by the Gestapo. How did those papers become the cherished publication read by generations and translated into dozens of languages? How might we conceive of the tragically brief life of the girl at the center of the book beside the long life of the diary itself? And how can we understand the diary's Jewishness? Who is it for? I'm Shana Hammerman, and this is Cite and Sound, the Stanford Jewish Studies podcast. On today's episode of Cite and Sound, literary critic and author Dr. Thomas Sparr joins us to discuss his new book, a biography of the diary of Anne Frank. Thomas is in conversation with Amir Eshel, professor of comparative literature and German studies and a core faculty member of the Toby Center for Jewish Studies. And now, the conversation.
This week, we mark two historical occasions. 3 days ago, January 27th, we marked the 80th anniversary of the entrance of the Russian army into Auschwitz-Birkenau, the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau 80 years ago. And today, January 30th, 92 years ago, Hitler took over power in Berlin. Another anniversary, both fall in this week. Tonight we gather here together to explore Dr. Sparr's recent book, Ich will fortleben, auch nach meinem Tod. I want to live on even after my death. A biography of the diary of Anne Frank. Published in German in 2023 to great acclaim. An English translation of this book is forthcoming. The book we discuss today is built on a fascinating premise. Books, much like humans, have a life of their own. This idea is especially powerful when considering a work as extraordinary as Anne Frank's diary. Thomas Sparr's account follows the diary's journey from a hidden manuscript in Amsterdam to one of the most significant and widely read books of our time. Thomas Sparr offers a profound insight into Anne Frank's diary, drawing on his extensive knowledge of modern Jewish intellectual and cultural history. His expertise spans the achievements of writers and thinkers, as well as the enduring themes of exile, migration, and remembrance. Let's start with the premise of the book, Thomas, a biography of the diary. Let's take this seriously for a moment, this premise. And maybe we start by you telling us a little bit about the birth moment of this diary. How did it come to be? How was the child born?
Thank you first, dear Amir, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very grateful to be again in Stanford. It's my fourth or fifth time to be here, and it's a real privilege. What do we know about this diary? The diary was written from a significant moment at the 30th birthday of Anne Frank in June 1942, when she got a present. And the present had been only a small book, what we are calling in German a Poesiealbum. And 1 month later, it was in Amsterdam during the Nazi period. It was German-occupied Amsterdam. The family had to hide. And to hide means to go to a hidden place in het Achterhuis, the Hinterhaus, the annex of the canton where Otto Frank worked for years. Anne had been the daughter of a German Jewish family, and the whole family, father, mother, and her sister Margot and they escaped from the deportation. They got already the order to come to a certain place, and she went to this place, to this hidden place, and Anne continued to write. She wrote every day, every moment, and she described the whole life of hidden people. Hidden people means they couldn't go out. There had been no escape, no fresh air. They could open sometimes the window in the night. And then they were joined by other people. 8 people lived in a very, very small room. You can right now see in New York a reproduction of this hidden place, of this annex, 1-to-1. It's extremely small. Anne continued to write, and the others remarked it, and she was taught, she got lessons, she lived her own life, a life of fantasy. And in August 44, this annex, this hidden place, was discovered by the SS, by the Gestapo, and the Germans came and arrested the whole family, and the others, hidden people, and they tried to find hidden things, money or treasures. And they discovered only papers. So they threw the papers all over the apartment, the small apartment, and they deported the people, the 8 people. And in the same evening, Miep van Gies, one of the helpers, as we have to say, those who helped the family to get hidden, she came to this apartment, to this hidden place, and she collected the papers because she knew that this was something which belonged to the girl, to Anne, so much. And the only treasure was saved by a chance, that she collected it. And as you probably know, the family got deported to Auschwitz via Westerbork, and only the father survived. And when the father came, Otto Frank, came back to Amsterdam in summer 45, he knew that his wife had been already murdered, but he didn't know about the 2 girls, and it came out after weeks that also the girls were killed or found dead in Bergen-Belsen, in another concentration camp. And Miep van Gies gave these papers only at that moment to the father, the saved treasure of this annex, which she kept for weeks. And the father read through these papers. He didn't do it before, never before. And he discovered a chronique or chronology of these 2 years, 2 hidden years, 2 years of escape, of danger, of permanent danger, and in a period of time where he was fighting with himself. He was very reluctant. He decided that these papers had to be published. And he gave it to other people to read it in this liberated Netherlands. And the historian Jan Romein published the first article in April 46. And by this article, by a hint to this book, to these papers, it became a real book, a first published book in November 47. And it was a small publication. It wasn't bought so much, it wasn't read so much. No one would have expected such a, how should we call it, such a publication history, such a success. Let's call it a success.
So when the diary first appears in print, is it immediately recognized for what it later became, what it is today?
No, I would say it was recognized in the Netherlands as a book among others. Very often it was called a Kriegsbook, a war book, which isn't it really. But the people, the first readers couldn't recognize the significance of this book as a historical testimony as it was regarded later. And it came out that this book had difficulties to be published in other countries. In other countries means in Germany. There is a whole history of the publication of this book, which I'm describing. And to make it short, it was very much refused by prestigious publishing houses like Rowohlt or Kippenhauer. They said, oh, it's only the story of a poor young girl who didn't survive. Who would be interested? We have other war books. And it was published by a very interesting publisher in 1950, Lambert Schneider. And Lambert Schneider had been the editor of the Schocken publishing house, a very honorable German man. And he founded his own publishing house. He got the first license of publishing books, I think already 45 by the American government during the occupation in Heidelberg. Heidelberg had been a center of, how to say, of Renaissance, of reconstruction. And in his house, in his publishing house, there had been other works published like Karl Jasper's Die Schuldfrage, The Question of Guilt, or Hannah Arendt's 6 essays, who became so hidden tradition, so important. And Die Wandlung, very interesting books. But imagine this occurred in a totally destroyed country, but not only physically destroyed, but also morally, intellectually. There had been 12 years of missing subjects, discussions, sciences, humanities, not developing. And after this interruption, this founding of the publishing house, this only publishing house, is so interesting. And it came out that was the right place. And on the other hand, we have to say that Otto Frank, the father, who I think had been the hero of the whole publication story, a real hero, he had been a master of public relation. When the Dutch edition came out, he sent the book to the old Queen Wilhelmina, to her daughter Juliana, and to the Crown Princess Beatrice, the ancient queen. And he knew that by this sending, offering the book, that this is a process of getting attention, drawing attention to the book. And until now, the Dutch kings and queens are in a certain way obliged to take care of Anne Frank's diary, which is very interesting. Later, he contacted Eleanor Roosevelt. He asked for a foreword. He contacted the German president Theodor Heuss. So he had really been a master of public relation in a very interesting way.
In your judgment, Thomas, and you studied the materials very extensively, you sat in the archive and had access to all the materials. So in your assessment, was it Otto Frank's PR genius that made the diary what it is? Or were there other factors in play that made this document to what it became later, an international canonic work, one could say?
First of all, I would say it was less the book than the figure of Anne Frank, who became the icon. Until today, we think about the young girl, and then we think of the diary. And he kept on that we have to read the diary. So he always mentioned, read, 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 and don't have fantasies about my daughter. But the people had fantasies. And so I think that he was a bit skeptic about the development of this icon. But this book became famous by chances. It wasn't structured. No success of a book is ever structured that you can foresee, that you can plan it. This is what we can learn with the Diary of Anne Frank. We can understand it like Kierkegaard says, we are publishing forwards, but we are understanding backwards. Wir leben vorwärts, aber wir verstehen das Leben rückwärts. And so I think it came out that this diary doesn't become famous only as a book, but by the means of a play. And the play took place at the Broadway in October 55 at the Court Theater. There had been a play, Diary of Anne Frank. And suddenly people were interested. They saw it, and it was an enormous success in the United States, and 1 year later in Europe and Germany as well. And then the people were enthusiastic about the book. They wanted to read it. And by chance, at that time, 55, 56, 57, there had been a huge process in the publication of pocketbooks. They became faster. And that supported the effect of the reception. Then people read it more and more, and millions of readers found it. And then there had been an international reception, which is totally unknown for the 50s. Of a Dutch book or a European book, I couldn't tell you any other book which had such a success in the 50s. Later, that is different. And especially a key role is playing in the United States, the reception in the United States, but all over the world. It was read in Japan. We have a unique reception in Japan. We have enormous reception also in South Africa in the later years, in the 90s, because Nelson Mandela read the book at Robben Island in his isolation. It was read by the 17 prisoners held there. And then he is a great fighter for this book, for the diary. So the diary, there had been also claims that it was a forgery, that it was false, and huge debates, especially in Germany. But as a book, I would say it became a unique significance by the understanding, by their perception as a historical document. And I'm skeptical if it's really a historical document, but if it isn't rather literature.
So say more about this, Thomas, because the diary brings together both events and occurrences of daily life. It records daily life. It presents life as it was in hiding. But at the same time, it has elements also of literature. Invented, created elements that become a part of it.
When the father read for the first time the diary of his daughter, Anne, he was shocked about her description of himself, of his wife, Edith, her mother, of the sister, Margot, and of the other hidden people. And he tried to understand, and he kept parts of the diary away because he didn't want to insult people that those who didn't survive would be insulted or could feel insulted. So there is a lot of fantasy in this diary. She is describing all day's life, the dangers, the pleasures, becoming of a young woman. And at the same time, she is thinking more, describing more. For instance, and I wrote a chapter about her sister Margot, And Margot, she's describing, oh, it's not that interesting as a girl, and she wants to become a nurse in Palestine, and she's a bit boring, mother's darling, also, and so on. As sisters sometimes describe the other sister. And it came out that Margot was totally different. She invented Margot, and she invented also other figures. So we have to take into account that there is also a lot of fantasy. It is not a description one-to-one. Don't expect that. And that could explain, I'm not a specialist for theater, why the play was so significant. Because the theater play allows probably other aspects, and this play, the real play, and she played also ein ernstes Spiel, a sincere play.
Going back, Thomas, to the role the father played. You describe beautifully in the book that we have actually 4 versions of the diary, 4 different versions, or 4 steps. So maybe you say a little bit something about this. I mean,
when I wrote it down, to tell you the truth, I got myself confused by that, but I'll do it. There is a version A, that means what Anne wrote day by day, and then there is a version B when she wrote it again, when she transposed it and composed it newly. And then there is a version C. The version C is the edited version of the year 47, the first, you remember, in the publishing house, the Dutch publishing house, with parts which were taken away, a rather censored version. And then that was the third version, and that was re-edited. There had been so much accusations that the Dutch authorities decided that they have to make eine Staatsausgabe.
So like an official
state edition, bringing the versions together. And then there came out a 4th version, which is the version D, A, B, C, D. And D means a newly composed, definitive version about everything Anne Frank wrote for the diary. Nothing was left, and it came out that this was the 3rd longer. This version had been for a 3rd longer. So you see, it's a very complicated edition history, and and this new edition came out only in 1990. And but so this is keeping the original rights of Anne Frank until today, because it was only then that a new version came out, and that this is a new composition. And it's very interesting also to study original rights, Urheberrecht. I don't know the English word for this. It's the
Urheberrecht.
Urheberrecht means the
copyright.
Copyright. Well, but you know, the copyright of the author even after his death. And normally it's like that. In the States, it's different from Europe. But in Europe, it's after 70 years, you can use the texts, but you can't use the text of Anne Frank. I mean, I'm glad that you can't do it. And this is because of the new composed book, new discovered and published book in a way, a new translated book. And there is also a long history of the translations of Anne Frank's diaries. It had been not very well translated to German. It had been quite well translated into English. It had been very well translated into Japanese, but then the Japanese reception is unique. I mean, I would say there are churches called after Anne Frank, and you can't make any difference any longer between the diary and the iconic Anne Frank.
As a figure, as a character.
As a figure, as a character. What I said before was that Otto Frank, the hero, as I judge him, always claimed, make a difference between my daughter as a figure and her diary. Make this difference. Read the book and don't have fantasies about her. I think Anne Frank had a certain self-perception. She knew about her talent. She knew that she was a very gifted girl, and she wanted to leave something, to work on that. Therefore, the version A and B. That is explainable by the fact that, like each writer, she wrote several versions, at least two. And therefore, I think she felt the mission. But she had this, not only the self-perception, but she's describing her life, her later life, the unlived life, the future life as a writer, as a mother, as a wife, but especially as a writer.
Thomas, say more about the hero, because, you know, there were over the years various voices regarding Otto Frank. People accused him of editing out important parts of the diary, of using the diary sometimes even to become himself famous, even rich, things like that, where he was accused of. He was accused straightforwardly of forgery, of
forgery, of making money with that.
Yeah.
And this had been totally wrong, and today we know that it's totally wrong. The book was sold, I don't know how many millions of copies. I think we have something like 40 or 30 million sold books. Sold books doesn't mean that it's only read. You know what I mean? And so he could have been a rich man, but he renounced and he kept the money. He called it the Anne money. And he lived a very modest life. He found another partner, another wife, Fritzi. She survived also the concentration camp. And they became a happy a happy couple, as far as we know. And over the years, he lived until, you told us, until 1980, over 30 years, 35 years, he answered every question. He went to school classes. He took care of the contracts. I mean, these are, you can't imagine, it's an archive of thousands and thousands letters, scripts, manuscripts. And he belonged to another generation. He had been an old father when his daughters were born. He was born 1889, same year as Hitler or Martin Heidegger. He survived the concentration camp Auschwitz at an age where almost nobody survived, at the age of 56. That had been an old age in former days. No, it's not. And he had the burden of being the onlyest survivor. And therefore, this explains that he himself wanted that the life of his daughter would be the book as a testimony. And he belonged to this, as we are here at the Taube Center, to this German Jewish bourgeoisie, Bürgertum. Let's say they were more German than Jewish. And in the 50s, there had been a huge discussion brought out by Maya Levine, a critic in New York, who was shocked by the success and shocked by the play showed at the Broadway. And he said, but this is not a Jewish story. This is not showing Jewish lives as they had been in this Amsterdam, occupied Amsterdam. And there had been a lot of fights and with him, and juridical accusations, and a very ugly story. But it brought to the world the question, does the Diary of Anne Frank is a Jewish book or a non-Jewish book? I wrote a chapter about the generation Anne Frank in the book, and it's very interesting that for a whole generation of girls 16 years old who read 57, 58 the book. And I had a lot of conversations with older people. I went to a center for older people where my mother lived, and then I asked them about their experience. And normally it had been their first experience with becoming known of German crimes and having no concept. I don't have to tell you this, that there had been no notion, no word for that. Shoah, Holocaust, it didn't exist. That made this book unique. And when you are asking for the gestalt of Jewishness, I would say the Jewishness of Anne Frank, in a certain way, it's her fate. I would say it's the fate. Does it belongs to the Jews or to the non-Jews? And which is a strange question. But Maya Levin asked it. Cynthia Otzig asked it again. Philip Roth wrote a whole book about that, also dealing with this question, The Ghostwriter. Fantastic novel. When you have any chance, read it. And so I think this Otto Frank, he had the authority of the father, he had the rights, but to have the rights doesn't mean that you are right, you know? It's a difference. And he said, oh, it's a book of the mankind, and all the money which came in from the honorarium of the sold copies were brought to a Anne Frank fund, which exists until today, based in Basel, where he lived for the last years of his life. And they are fighting, this fund is fighting against anti-Semitism, racism, and each kind of violation of mankind, of human rights. So I think that Otto Frank, he had a long life. He became 91, and you know, there had been a great celebration. I still remember that I saw pictures 1979 for the 50th anniversary of his daughter, of his killed daughter, dead daughter. And he said together with all the world came there. And the Anne Frank house until today is a center of political significance, let's say like this. American presidents have to go there and are going there. John F. Kennedy sent something, and Nelson Mandela came there. And normally it belongs to a state visit. I'm beginning with a state visit. Normally a state visit in the Netherlands began with the visit of the Anne Frank house. And some of you had been there. If not, probably you should go to New York and have a look on this. So this is, in small words, said about Otto Frank, who hopefully will be discovered as somebody who kept not only the memory, but the book as this memory, as this written memory.
Thomas, I want to ask you about your experience with the diary and with writing this book. You were born in Germany, grew up in Lübeck, became a literary critic, wrote several books. How was it for you working on this particular book? What touched you, surprised you? How was it for you personally?
It was a new experience, but because it was the first book which I wrote in charge. I mean, I was charged with it. I didn't choose it. You can choose to be charged, but I chose the charge and commissioned. You say, but I felt charged. And then the Anfang Affront asked me to write it. And that was a new experience. Because when you are writing something and you are commissioned by such a fond or by a university or whatsoever, you have to fulfill the expectations of others and not your own, not only your own. And there is always, that means there are some conflicts which do not happen if you are writing your own book, if you are discovering your own subject. And that was a new and a good experience.
Good in which way? If I may push you on this, as we say, in America, if I can push you on this.
I was well paid. Really, that was the experience, and it was, and I got invitations to discuss with people in Germany, also in other countries. I went to school classes, and that was also a new experience. How do children of 13, 14, 15 years now judge this book? To learn as an older man something from younger people, that was also a wonderful experience which I made. And this is also connected, then she was a very gifted girl, but she was gifted as a writer. She saw herself very early as a writer, but she didn't get the chance to become a writer, but she got the chance, and that was fulfilled by the father and by all the readers, I would say. So I think this is enough of experience.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. So as a part of this podcast series of the Taube Center for Jewish Studies, we ask our guests to offer a quote from a Jewish source, a Jewish writer or a Jewish source you're familiar with, something for us to take with us from your work and from this event. What would your quote be?
I was prepared. If you would allow me to say it first in German, it's from Paul Celan, the great Jewish poet. Das Jüdische ist eine Gestalt des Menschlichen. Jewishness is a form of humanity, humankind. You have a lot of possibilities to translate it accurately.
And it goes back to the question, is Anne Frank Jewish, or is the diary a Jewish book?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
It's exactly the answer. Es ist eine Gestalt, das jüdische Mädchen ist eine Gestalt des Menschlichen.
Yeah. So the diary you see as an expression of being Jewish, as being a part of humanity.
Yeah, I would say. So she's keeping lessons for everyone, for each of us.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Let's please thank Thomas Sparr for this fascinating discussion.
Today's episode was produced by me, Shana Hammerman, along with Eva Clem and Nilo Farsaraj. Sound design by Romy Chikorian. Original music is by Jeremiah Lockwood. Sight and Sound is a production of the Toby Center for Jewish Studies at Stanford.
Stanford University.